and a very warm welcome to Ameco. You're watching our daily updates live from the studio. I am Gaila Damu. Stay with us. African Union Commissioner for Education, Science, Technology and Innovation, Professor Mohamed Balloun Singh said Africa needs to build the capacity of teachers to be able to teach African history with African resources. Johannes Uljalam tells us more.
Briefing the media, the Commissioner highlighted the situation on the continent's education system, challenges and issues needed for further attention to build a resilient education system in the continent. Balloun Singh stressed that attention needs to be given on education quality, infrastructure, teacher qualification as a human right.
To our experts and to our political leaders is to try to decolonize the teaching of history. So we need to build the capacity of our teachers to be able to teach African history with African sources and with an African narrative, because often we are still sort of using the colonial narrative instead of using the African narrative. And fortunately, we have enough resources in terms of knowledge about African history written by African experts.
Fortunately, he stated that we have enough resource in terms of knowledge about African history written by African experts.
We have a school-age population in Africa of 500 million, 500 million. And out of that 500 million, almost 100 million are not attending school. I'm talking about people aged between 5 and 19, meaning the period of schooling, primary and secondary schooling. This is very concerning.
This is very concerning, Balloun Singh said, adding that this means we have a massive 100 million children that are not socially integrated, because at that age, the social integration is mainly through school. Therefore, he stressed that when they are not attending a school, they are not socially integrated. When they are not socially integrated, they are vulnerable to all sorts of vulnerabilities. On the other hand, the Commissioner added the need to support these young people to get some skills so that they can even start their own job and become job creators instead of job seekers. Financing is also another critical issue, he said. Adding the estimates made are that Africa may need $90 billion to reach the universal coverage of education by 2030. Balloun Singh added that Africa needs to continue to invest on science, technology and innovation to enhance quality education. We also need to train our teachers about being able to use digital tools. We have to bring education to our children through digitalization, he said. Balloun Singh elaborated that we also need to train our teachers about being able to use the digital tools, that we have to bring education to our children through digitalization. This year's African Union Summit is being held under the theme of Educate an African Fit for the 21st Century, building a resilient education system for increased access to inclusive, lifelong, quality and relevant learning in Africa.
Ethiopia's Minister of Foreign Affairs, Taye Asqeselase, held numerous bilateral talks with foreign affairs ministers of various African countries. Branu Ismo has the details.
The discussions were held on the sidelines of the 44th Ordinary Session of the Executive Council of the African Union. Accordingly, Taye held discussion with International Relations and Cooperation Minister of South Africa, Nalindi Pandor, Minister of Foreign Affairs and Development Cooperation of Burundi, Albert Shingiro, and Cameroon's Foreign Minister, Leonie Mbila on bilateral issues. Taye told Ina that Ethiopia and South Africa have signed a strategic partnership agreement to bolster bilateral and multilateral relations of common interest. Citing the long-standing relations between the two countries, the strategic agreement aims to further relations between the two countries, he said. To this effect, the minister stated that an agreement has been reached to cooperate in education, technology, telecom, security and safety, knowledge transfer and other spheres. Taye also reaffirmed the commitment of Ethiopia to take the bilateral relations between Ethiopia and South Africa to a higher level. Similarly, Foreign Minister Taye conferred with Cameroon's Foreign Minister Leonie Mbela on issues of further strengthening cooperation between the two countries. Taye also indicated that he had a fruitful discussion with his Burundi's counterpart, Minister of Foreign Affairs and Development Cooperation, Albert Shingiro. Taye said that during the discussion, important points were raised on foreign comprehensive relations with Ethiopia. Moreover, Taye held discussion with Zimbabwe's, Benin's and Angolan counterparts to further strengthen diplomatic ties. Foreign Minister Taye also discussed with Norway's Minister of International Development, Anne-Beth Tivenere, on issues of education, climate change, humanitarian aid and other issues.
Foreign ministers of Ethiopia and Zimbabwe expressed that they will further strengthen their historical bilateral relation. Bellet Ataraqain has the details.
The 37th regular session of the African Union is to be held from February 17 to 18, 2024 at the headquarters of the Union in Addis Ababa. As the schedule of the session indicated, the development and implementation of effective, long-lasting, system-wide education change strategies, as well as the adjustment of limited education finance system, are among the agendas that the summit will focus on. Alongside with regular summit of the leaders, the bilateral forum is also taking place, and the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Ethiopia and Zimbabwe have held talks in strengthening the historical relation between the two countries. Speaking on the talks, Minister of Foreign Affairs of Ethiopia Ambassador Taye Asqasellasey said that Ethiopia and Zimbabwe will continue to strengthen their historical bilateral relation.
Minister Frederick, what a great pleasure to see you here in Addis. We have been closely working in New York at the United Nations, and we used to align our position in many instances. And the advice of Zimbabwe for not only for Ethiopia, but also for many African countries on issues of significance and importance has been indeed very, very phenomenal. We have discussed today on how to give more energy, more vitality, and more strength to the historic and an outstanding relationship between Ethiopia and Zimbabwe. It is one of the countries that understands the historic significance of Ethiopia, the contribution that we have done during the liberation period in the 60s and the 50s. So our current relationship is pretty much informed by the past cooperation that we have had in between our two countries in the AU platform and as well as in other international platforms as well.
Zimbabwe's Foreign Affairs Minister Frederick Shaba on his part said that Zimbabwe would help Ethiopia's effort to secure a seagate and share its experience.
Those are some of the areas we have discussed. We have also discussed the initiatives that Ethiopia are taking in order to get access to the sea, and we have understood their issues and we've given them our experiences, because on our part, we too relate to Namibia, to South Africa and to Mozambique in order to get to the sea, and we have a platform on which we discuss how to do so in the most amicable way.
It is said that the two countries would work together in agriculture, mining, tourism, commerce and industry.
The 44th Ordinary Session of the Executive Council of the African Union kicked off in Addis Ababa. During the occasion, Ethiopia's Foreign Minister Taye Asqasellasey proposed the inclusion of Amharic as the official language of the Union. Modomluye presents the story.
The 44th Ordinary Session of the Executive Council of the African Union kicked off in Addis Ababa. During the occasion, Ethiopia's Foreign Minister Taye Asqasellasey proposed the inclusion of Amharic as the official language of the Union. The Foreign Minister mentioned that the requisition is presented in alignment with the African Union Agenda 2063 and the goal for empowering indigenous African languages to contribute for the continent's progress.
in alignment with the AU Agenda 2063 and the goal for empowering indigenous African language to contribute to our continent's progress, I wish to propose the inclusion of Amharic as the official language of the African Union.
The Foreign Minister reminded the Executive Council of the Union that formerly the Organization of African Unity, or OAU's charter, was initially signed in 4 languages, including Amharic. Including indigenous languages as an official language would possibly help the Union's efforts to withdraw from mind colonialism and to exercise and rely upon African solutions for African problems.
It is worth noting that the OAU Charter was initially signed in 4 languages, including Amharic. Adopting Amharic as one of the official languages of the Union would honor Africa's linguistic diversity and strengthen our collective identity as Africans. Amasagnalo.
Studies indicated that having different working and official languages is important for promoting inclusivity, preserving cultural diversity, facilitating communication, enhancing representation, and promoting multilingualism and education. Ethiopian scholars suggest that Amharic language is more efficient and economical than other non-indigenous languages such as English and Latin, as Amharic saves time and space when written, for it doesn't use consonants and vowels side by side.
It is better to preserve and transfer the letters obtained from our forefathers having their appropriate sound, meaning and way of writing. This is because the ancient history and wisdom of people relies on letters. Therefore, extensive researches should be conducted to teach the letters and the language for anyone who is interested to learn, keeping its accurate sound, representation, meaning and source.
ከነትክክለኛ ምንጫቸው አመጣጡና ከነትክክለኛ የፊደላቱ ትርጉም መሰጠት መቻል አለበት።
Amharic is the second most spoken Semitic language in the world after Arabic. Having its own writing system called Fidel, it stands the third most spoken language in Africa next to Hausa and Swahili. Amharic is also considered the best documented of the Ethio-Semitic languages and the official working language of the country.
As we proceed to news beyond borders, Arab League pushes for ceasefire resolution despite US threats. Members of the Arab group say they have massive support among UN Security Council members to pass a draft resolution calling for a ceasefire in Gaza. Palestinian Ambassador Riyad Mansour said the impending Israeli military invasion of Rafah would depopulate the Gaza Strip and urged Council members to vote for the draft when it is advanced by Algeria. The US ambassador to the United Nations warned last week that the proposed resolution demanding an immediate humanitarian ceasefire is putting sensitive negotiations for a prolonged humanitarian pause and release of all Israeli hostages in jeopardy, as African News reported it. The US has warned that Russia could seize Ukraine's key eastern town of Avdiivka, the scene of some of the fiercest fighting in recent months. National Security Council spokesman John Kirby said that Avdiivka is at least of falling into Russian control, citing Ukraine's ammunition shortage. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky vowed to do everything to save as many Ukrainian lives as possible. Russian troops have made gains in Avdiivka, threatening to encircle it. The town, which has been almost completely destroyed, is seen as a gateway to nearby Donetsk, the regional Ukrainian capital seized by Russian-backed fighters in 2014 and later illegitimately annexed by Moscow. Russian President Vladimir Putin launched a full-scale invasion of Ukraine dependent on weapons supplies from the US and other Western allies to be able to continue fighting Russia, a much bigger military force with an abundance of artillery ammunition. NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg warned on Thursday that the US failure to approve continued military assistance to Ukraine was already having an impact on the battlefield, as BBC News reported it. That's all the news we have for today. I'm Gaila Damu. Thanks for watching and stay tuned with the rest of our programs.